Recently, IG Aonuma confirmed there would be no DLC for Tears of the Kingdom, plus also Nintendo have been showing off their new Nintendo Switch to developers behind closed doors. Given this news, I think it's time to start looking forward to the next Legend of Zelda adventure on the Nintendo Switch 2. Well, today I'm going to go through my thoughts on the next Zelda game, plus I've gathered some of your ideas as well, and we can go over those today. Well, I, like many others, assumed we would be getting Tears of the Kingdom DLC, but last week IG Aonuma confirmed in an interview with Famitsu that we wouldn't be getting any substantial DLC for Tears of the Kingdom. He said that he and the team had done everything that they could in the world, plus he's already thinking about the next fun experience, although he didn't know what form that would take. Aonuma didn't really offer anything conclusive, although he did allude to a completely new way to play. Well, the news related to no Tears of the Kingdom DLC arrives alongside Nintendo showing off their next console to developers behind closed doors at Gamescom 2023 in Germany. Apparently, it's running a Final Fantasy VII Remake, plus developers have been shown a version of Breath of the Wild that includes a higher frame rate and better graphics. Could this mean we're going to be getting a remastered Breath of the Wild at the launch of the Switch 2? Well, maybe. I think it's more likely that Nintendo are going to be showing off the potential for their new console rather than a remastered version of Breath of the Wild. But here are a couple of details that we have about the Switch 2. So it's likely to release in 2024. There is a huge performance boost, including the use of NVIDIA's Deep Learning Super Sampling, that is DLSS, and also ray tracing technologies as well. Also, it includes a new camera and is likely to cost around $399. So while the details are minimal at this time, there are a couple of interesting items here. So first of all, the huge performance boost that could allow our first-party Nintendo games to look even better than before. Nintendo has been showing off an improved Breath of the Wild to developers, which means better graphics, but it could also mean gameplay improvements as well. So Nintendo leaned into the building mechanic in Tears of the Kingdom, something born from the creative ways players would use items in Breath of the Wild. Co-op is something that was born out of mods from Breath of the Wild, and this new technology could allow Nintendo to realise co-op play in an open-world Zelda for the very first time in an official capacity. Well, the camera offers some interesting potential for interactions with a new Zelda game as well. A new camera could point to augmented reality features, and if the Switch 2 is portable like the original Switch, then we could see some really interesting innovations around AR or perhaps even virtual reality as well. I think for the Switch 2 to be a winner, all Nintendo really needs to do is boost the performance, although that isn't really a thing that Nintendo would do. They do like to lean into their gimmicks. I really hope they keep things simple, keeping the console backwards compatible and increasing the performance, allowing for better looking games. Well, those simple improvements would keep me very happy indeed. Well, just after the release of Tears of the Kingdom, IG Aonuma did talk about the next Zelda game to Game Informer magazine in May 2023. So here is an excerpt from that interview. So IG Aonuma says, with Ocarina of Time, I think it's correct to say that it did kind of create a format for a number of titles in the franchise that came after it. But in some ways it was a little bit restricting for us. While we always aimed to give the player freedoms of certain kinds, there were certain things that format didn't really afford in giving people freedom. Of course, the series continued to evolve after Ocarina of Time, but I think it's also fair to say now we've arrived at Breath of the Wild and a new type of more open play and freedom that affords, yes, I think it's correct to say it's created a new kind of format for the series to proceed from. Well, this very much sounds like IG Aonuma and the team are going to continue their journey on an open world Zelda. Having played through Tears of the Kingdom now and the dust has settled since its release in May, I'd like to see a new Hyrule, or the play area dramatically changed. So in Tears of the Kingdom, the surface of Hyrule was very similar, although the depths were very cool, albeit not with very much to do, and the Sky Islands, well, they weren't quite as detailed as I thought they were going to be. You know, while I do love Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, I really want to see Link and Zelda somewhere new. The death of Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom could be a clue to the next Zelda game. If Nintendo wanted to provide us an entirely new map, or somewhere new to explore, they could take us out of Hyrule into the realm of the dead. So the bargain of statues are interesting NPCs in Tears of the Kingdom, which aren't really well explained, but they could provide a path for Link and Zelda to chase down Ganondorf in another realm. How this could play out is anyone's guess, but given the story went to some wild places in Tears of the Kingdom, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens next. Well, before we get to a new Zelda game, I actually think we're going to get a remake or a remaster of some kind. Now, personally, I would love to see a Link to the Past remade, built from the ground up for the Nintendo Switch 2. Also, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, is another title I'd love to see given the remake treatment. Now, swordplay in that game was all important, and it could turn into a combat-focused Zelda game with much tougher fights compared to Breath of the Wild, and also Tears of the Kingdom as well. Well, Nintendo is showing an improved Breath of the Wild to developers. You know, is that something that we really want? Is it all just a little bit too recent? Are Nintendo looking over at PlayStation with Naughty Dog's Last of Us remake and thinking about this for Switch 2 as a launch title? Well, I certainly hope not, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. So the final point in the known details about the Switch 2 is the potential release of 2024. Now, Tears of the Kingdom just released this year, and the development cycle for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is about 5 to 6 years. Therefore, if we're going to get another open world Zelda, like IG Aonuma says, in theory we could be waiting until 2028 for the next mainline Zelda release, which would be 4 years into the cycle of the Switch 2 if it were to release next year. Now that sounds like a very long time for a new Zelda, and I hope we don't have to wait that long, but masterpieces like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, well, they certainly take their time. Well, that is what I think about the next Legend of Zelda adventure on the Nintendo Switch 2, but next up I did reach out to the community earlier on in the week, and I've got your thoughts about the next Zelda game on the Nintendo Switch 2, so let's go over to those now. First of all, we've got It's Riot's Play Z2377, and It's Riot Play says a sequel to Tears of the Kingdom, but it has another country outside of Hyrule. Well, certainly agree with that one. I do think the current Hyrule that we've been playing in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, that is a little bit tired, and it's good to see that other people want to play in a different play space as well. Well, next up we've got Mr. Ikana, and good to see you, Ikana. You joined in those Zelda game clubs a little while ago, so really appreciate it, and good to hear from you. And Mr. Ikana says, I think Skyward Sword was on the right track with its items and upgrades. Honestly, if they just made something like Skyward Sword, but with a better overworld, I would be happy. So Mr. Ikana, I think you are talking about a more linear Zelda there, and Skyward Sword certainly was a very good entry into the series, had an absolutely fantastic story, had some really good dungeons from classic dungeon designs, and yeah, I think you might be onto something there. So if they just added a little bit more open world nature to the Skyward Sword formula, I reckon that would be pretty good too. Well, next up we got Vizhouse Gamer, and Vizhouse says, I want to see a 4K remake of Ocarina of Time. And Vizhouse, definitely agree with you there. A remake of Ocarina of Time would be really good. We already did get a mobile remake of Ocarina of Time, although personally I remember the Nintendo 64 version and played through that one when I was a teenager. But yeah, I definitely think Ocarina of Time could be a candidate. Personally, I would like to see a Link to the Past remade, but Ocarina of Time certainly is up there, and it'd be really good to see that remade in modern graphics. Well, next up, we've got a comment from Link, and Link says, they also said if they made a new game to keep our expectations high, meaning that they don't have the intention to make a lower quality game than Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, although I doubt they're going to be making a new open-world Zelda game, returning to traditional Zelda games featuring a brand new Link and Zelda could be great also. Kind of like what they did with Mario Wonder by reintroducing a 2D Mario game. At the moment, it seems like Nintendo doesn't really know exactly what they want to do, and they seem satisfied with the Breath of the Wild universe, so I'm betting we're either going to get a port, a remake, or a brand new traditional Zelda game. Well, thank you, Link, really appreciate your comment, and I agree with you there. I think we're going to get a remake or a remaster as well. I'm not too sure about the Zelda team going back to the more linear formula. I think IG Aonuma has said they're going down the open world route from now on, although these games take a really long time to make, so it's going to be interesting to see what the Zelda team do next. Well, next up we got a comment from Michael Wallace5389, and Michael says, "Love the Sky Island, so more or something along those lines, and all the crazy builds that you can make. I can't see them turning back from that for now. Other than that, not a totally linear game, but something more story linear with more dungeons." Well, thank you, Michael. Really appreciate your comment there. And this is definitely along the similar lines of what other people are saying in terms of wanting a more linear Zelda game and a more story-focused Zelda game as well. That is the challenging thing with making an open-world Zelda game. It does mean the story, you have to kind of experience that in any order, and a lot of people have said it kind of takes them out of the story and makes the story a little bit less impactful. So I have to agree with you. I would like to see something a little bit more linear, although I don't really want to let go of that open world, so it really is a big dilemma for the Zelda team. Well, next up we've got Johan Anderson 8646, and Johan says, "Since 3D Zelda takes such a long time in development, they should, and I think they will, release smaller Zelda games in between. They should go back to the 2D Zelda side-scroller, a remake of the second game on the NES, or a completely new story in the form of a Metroidvania. They don't even need to invent any new item. All of the old Zelda games are filled with items that can be used for ability gating, and it would still feel fresh, since we only previously used these items in top-down or 3D. Well, Johan, I think this is an absolutely fantastic idea. I would love to see a new 2D Zelda, and so you mentioned there a remake of the second game on the NES, or a completely new story in the form of a Metroidvania, so combining Metroidvania and Legend of Zelda, I think that is absolutely genius, and we should definitely send that one into Nintendo, and hopefully they're going to take that idea on board. Well, next up we've got Mark Car 8, and Mark Car says, "It feels sad how some people expect all Nintendo games to come with DLC. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and maybe Zelda Triforce Heroes, that was a free content update, is the only developed Zelda game to get it." Well, you're absolutely right there, Mark Car 8. I certainly expected DLC for Tears of the Kingdom and was a little bit surprised, but I think it's because of the timing with the new console. You're absolutely right, it was only Breath of the Wild that received DLC, and maybe because it was really early in the generation of Nintendo Switch, but it was a little bit surprising that Tears of the Kingdom wasn't going to get DLC, but given that Tears of the Kingdom was developed as DLC for Breath of the Wild in the first place, I guess it's not really that surprising, and the good news is the Zelda team can move quickly onto developing a new Zelda game for the Nintendo Switch 2. Well, next up we got Jess Gulwell1274, and Jess says, "A playable Zelda in a smaller game compared to Tears of the Kingdom would be enough to get people playing it after Tears of the Kingdom." Well, thank you, Jess. Really appreciate your comment. Yes, and a smaller Zelda adventure, I guess after the last two, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom being absolutely huge games, a smaller, more contained story in a Zelda adventure would be a welcome relief. Well, that is it for all of your comments, and thank you to everyone who wrote in. Really appreciate your comments. Always good to get the opinions from the community. But let me know down in the comments what you want to see from the next Legend of Zelda on Nintendo Switch 2, and let me know what we've missed here, and also what else you want to see. Well, that is it for now for what we want from the Legend of Zelda on the Switch 2. And as always, thank you so much for watching or for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you real soon.